right, 101 week 13 part 4. Um, all right, so Berkman's talking about failure. He's got a little bit more here to talk about the museum before he gets to his main point. By far the most striking thing about the museum, though, is that it should exist as a viable, meaning it's alive, it works, that it should exist as a viable profit-making business in the first place. You might have assumed that any consumer product manufacturer worthy of the name would have its own such collection, a carefully stewarded, meaning cared for, resource to help it avoid making errors its rivals had already made. Yet the executives who arrive every week at Sherry's door are evidence of how rarely this thing happens. Product developers are so focused on their next hoped-for success, so unwilling to invest time or energy thinking about their industry's past failures, that they only belatedly, that's too late, realize how much they need access to GfK's collection. Most surprising of all is that many of the designers who have found their way to the museum have come there to examine, or been surprised to discover, products their own companies had created and then abandoned. They were apparently so averse, meaning they didn't want to do it, to dwelling on the unpleasant business of failure, they neglected to keep samples of their own disasters. Right? So he says that, like, people come visit, you'd think if you ran a company, right, you'd want to have, like, a list of things that didn't work so you don't make the same mistakes again in the future. It turns out nobody does that. And so people come to the museum to see what didn't work. That way they can stop stupid ideas before they get farther into the sort of world. Cool. Okay, this is easy. I'm already like mostly done with page 2, and I don't really have a whole lot to say. So it's pretty straightforward. But most of the time he's been talking about this one example. So now he's going to get into some sort of more interesting stuff. So let's take a look at what he has to say here. Failure is everywhere. It's just most of the time we'd rather avoid confronting that fact. Right? Most people don't like to spend a lot of time thinking about failure. And now, why is that? Well, one of the reasons is because of Emerson. Ha! Connection. One of the reasons is because of Emerson. Emerson told people to, you can see how inspiring and exciting reading Emerson could be. He's very positive. Just like, follow your, you know the truth in your heart, follow your heart, and you will command the world and you will do amazing things if you just be true to yourself. And he's a very popular philosopher. People love Emerson, even if they've never read him. His ideas got copied by people and those copies got copied. And so everybody's got a little bit of Emerson in them if you grew up in America. It's a very Emerson culture. And that's one of the reasons why people don't like to think about failure. And it's true. I think you really think it's true. People don't want to focus on the negative. But if you say too many negative things, people will say, "Man, you should be positive. This is, you're really, you got to be a more positive person." People don't like thinking about failure. All right, I'm going to let him. I was going to make his point for him, but let's keep going. Actually, let's see what else he has to say about this. He says, behind all the most popular modern approaches to happiness and success is the simple philosophy of focusing on things going right. People love to think positively. But ever since the first philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome, hey, that's Plato, but ever since the first philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome, a dissenting perspective has proposed the opposite. Meaning the dissenting means opposite, right? You're not agreeing with everybody else. So most popular modern approaches, people want to focus on things going right. But there have been people going all the way back to ancient Greece and Plato, where people say the opposite. A dissenting perspective that has proposed the opposite. Dissent is when you don't agree with people. It's that our relentless effort to feel happy or to achieve certain goals, that is precisely what makes us miserable and sabotages our plans. Boy, that's interesting, isn't it? This is an interesting idea. It's our relentless effort to feel happy or achieve certain goals that is precisely what makes us miserable and sabotages our plans. See, usually we tell people when they're trying to do something, they should think positively, be positive, we want people to be positive. If you're trying to do something, just be positive. But he makes this really interesting claim. Berkman says, what if trying to be positive is the thing that's making everybody miserable? And he says there are certain philosophers going all the way back to the time of ancient Greece and Plato who have suggested that this is the case, that trying to think positively, the glass is half full. It's not half empty, it's half full. Look on the bright side, see things in a positive way, don't be a hater. He thinks a relentless effort, meaning unstoppable effort, to feel happy, that's what makes us unhappy. Interesting. See, now that's an interesting point. I don't hate it. Um, he's gonna say that he's gonna say it again in a slightly different way. It is our constant quest to eliminate or ignore the negative, insecurity, uncertainty, failure, sadness, that causes us to feel so insecure, anxious, uncertain, or unhappy in the first place. He says, thinking positive, we never want to think that. We ignore the negative. We ignore uncertainty, we ignore insecurity, we ignore uncertainty, we ignore failure, we ignore sadness, and that's what causes us to feel bad. When we ignore these things, insecurity, uncertainty, failure, and sadness, we end up with this is how we feel: insecure, anxious, uncertain, or unhappy. That's his point. It's a strange point. It's an interesting point, and I don't hate it. So that's what he's talking about. So let's take a look at what else he's got going on here. So I'm gonna go to the changing pages. You can look at some trees or some sky or whatever. This is pretty easy to teach. I don't know. I probably should teach stuff like this all the time. I could. I could have a whole semester and all the readings could be like this. But the problem is I think I'd get bored. I mean, I do like, it's nice to have something easy. You know what it is? I mean, I've said this before, but the reason why I spend so much time with Plato, even though he's fucking impossible to read, the reason why I spend so much time with Plato is because it's like lifting heavy weights. It sucks to lift heavy weights. It hurts your arms. You end up sore the next day. But if you lift heavy weights, you get strong. This guy is a little bit like going to the gym and lifting easy weights. I mean, it is certainly more pleasant. And he'll make you a little bit stronger, but not like a lot stronger. So that's why I do it like this. Okay, so and that's why I spend so much time on play. I'm sure because you guys are probably like, well, wait a minute, Jeff, if you could pick the readings, why don't you pick some fucking easier stuff? And it's the same thing. It's like telling me to teach something easier than Play-Doh is like going to the gym and telling the bodybuilder to pick up why don't you that seems really hard to pick up. Why don't you pick up something, why don't you lift like less weights than that and it won't be so painful. He wants it to be painful because he wants big muscles. And I want my reading to be painful and difficult because it makes my soul bigger. That's a crazy thing to say. I shouldn't have said that. Whatever. That's how I feel. Everybody, what are they going to do to me? Okay, let's take a look at the last sentence of page 2. So he says, yet this conclusion, right? He's talking about the conclusion. He says this conclusion. He's talking about the conclusion that maybe ignoring failure and focusing on positive thinking causes us to be unhappy. So now he's going to say something about that. So he says this conclusion does not have to be depressing. Instead, it points to an alternative approach, a negative path to happiness. Right? Thinking about bad things makes you happy? That's strange, but that's his idea. Instead, it points to an alternative approach, a negative path to happiness that entails taking a radically different stance toward those things most of us spend our lives trying hard to avoid. This is his big idea, and it's an interesting one, right? That maybe the way to be happy is to think negative thoughts. Strange idea, but I like strange ideas. It's fun. All right, so that's his idea. Let's see what he says. This involves learning to enjoy uncertainty, embracing insecurity, and becoming familiar with failure. In order to be truly happy, it turns out, we might actually need to be willing to experience more negative emotions, or at the very least, stop running quite so hard from them. In order to be happy, we might need to experience more negative emotions. Because usually you think of negative emotions as being the ones that make you unhappy. But honestly, I just gave an example right there. I mean, I already did this like 2 seconds ago. We read Plato this semester. That was, I think for a lot of people, a pretty painful experience. But my idea is, and a lot of you guys tried to do it, and you experienced some form of failure. Not like an F on a paper or anything. Well, that's okay too, if it happened to you. But people experienced, students wrote me and they were like, Professor, I tried to read this and I can't read it. I can't make any sense of this. You failed. That's okay, says Berkman. It's actually a good thing. Like, it can help you win and it can help you be happier, and it can help you maybe even win in the end. So let's, I'm done with this video. Let's pick it up on the next video. I'll see you soon.